This new Monday morning. Have the pleasure and honor of sharing the stage with Karl Dakin and with Cohen, who should be joining us shortly. Naturally, we're talking about live stream strategy as it applies to today's focus word value. And that could mean a lot to a lot of different people in a lot of different situations. So chat's wide open. We depend on chat to be as relevant as possible. And so, Karl, why don't you open the show with an update and your initial thoughts?
Sure. Happy to be here as a guest on your show this Monday morning. The topic of value is something that's near and dear to my heart. And there's Cohen. Good morning, Cohen. And as we talk about value, my narrow perspective of the world is I look at value in terms of raising funding. And in order for an investor candidate to consider an investment opportunity, they want to understand the value of this potential opportunity. And I've been challenged in communicating this to small businesses and people I work with in raising funding, that you can't simply say, hey, jump on my train, we're going to go somewhere, without talking about when they get off the train, which is when the investor collects the value, they realize the value. And so many different offers out there simply lack this basic information. And I'm putting this into my daily newsletter, which was delayed a little bit this morning because this morning was fairly hectic across the board. But I'll be posting it later this morning. But if you don't explain to the investor the value when they get done with the investment, they lack essential information to make the original investment decision. And if you can't tell them that, you don't explain it, you don't hardwire it to make it happen, then you look stupid. And maybe that's too soft. Maybe you look really foolish, because you're asking somebody for money, but you're not telling them when and how, why they're going to get their money back. And if they don't get it back, then why would they make the initial decision? It becomes a catch-22 at that point. And how you go about determining value, projecting value, which are all down the road, all in the future, is both a science and an art. And I'm looking for Khan to give me all the answers to all my questions this morning.
Well, Con, welcome. Sorry for a little communication lag there. Our word is value. It kind of got hidden in the title of the promotion. Uh, like I mentioned, value could mean a lot to a lot of people. So I'd love to hear a little bit of an update. How's your book? How are you? And what's your initial thoughts on value?
Well, good morning, Don. Good morning, Karl. Good morning to our audience. Happy Monday. Another strong week to start off ahead, and such a pleasure to be here with you. Well, value, right off the bat, look at us. We have some wonderful insights for anybody that's here to collect value. Hopefully, that investment in their time here will pay off and they'll walk away with one or two good tips that they can apply immediately to themselves and to their business. So, yeah. So, as far as value goes, I guess value is in the eyes of the beholder. And in order for us to be able to communicate that we offer value, we have to make sure that we are communicating in a way that the person that needs to hear the message understands it and agrees with us that truly there is value to this. And I think that's a good starting point for us to be able to frame our discussion and make sure that we are communicating that value to this audience as so they can communicate it to their audience.
Yeah, what a great way to start. I think it gives us a lot of foundation. Naturally doing the word of the day and doing so many shows, you understand words have context, they have application, they're relative, they're conditional, situational. I mean, you can keep adding a lot of L's to that. And I think staging is so important when you're trying to present and support value, which is you should start with value and build on it, where most people think the goal is to get to the mission of having value. Well, that's looking for a needle in a haystack after you haven't been looking for a needle all along the way. And you need to keep people's attention, and you got to keep people believing that their decision they made was a good decision, because until there's some action or results, you're just, well, I hope, looks like it could work out. But when it starts working out, now you shift to expanding value versus creating or finding value. And that should actually be in the discussion before you actually endeavor to go forward. So, there are no simple one way fits all words or strategies, but I think the best approach is putting yourself in the other person's shoes, right? And asking yourself, how satisfied, how comfortable am I becoming with new results coming forward or no results coming forward? And then on the other side of value is the person who, let's say, delivers it, and they need to hear something that says, I'm glad I'm starting up with this new person because they're proving themselves to have value and adding value to my value. But before we swing it to Karl, can't not mention Harvey. Harvey is the franchise show on Tuesdays following this show. He's just been a stellar example of what really putting yourself to work, but also putting your thought to work in creating the show, not just doing the show. So by promoting it properly, supporting it afterwards, making the right connections, building the right relationships, the live stream is the foundation. It's not it. If that's all there is at the end of the show, you're missing the first and the last half or third. Let me see. Dennis is here. Dennis is always here. Always appreciate you, Dennis. Agree, you have to be well trained before you jump on the train. And that's why shows like this, Zoom meetings you might have, it gives you a chance to share thoughts and ideas before you have to even contemplate a decision or moving forward, and maybe get seasoned and infused over time, that when situations come up, you've heard a lot of terms, a lot of ways of doing things that can support you going forward. Harvey says, sorry, Con, appeared just before I sent that. 3 lovely friends. Harvey's fast to respond. Value is such an important word. It is what we exchange for time. It's what we exchange for our life, right? What we do every day, who we do it with, what we feel successful at. Dennis comes back with, thanks for tipping us, for listening and learning to you. I tell you one thing, what I've learned over time is we all learn together, right? I don't know the answers until I ask the questions, and I don't get the questions until I see some answers. So there is a revolving door or a reciprocal nature to all this. But you're right, Dennis. Here we have a LinkedIn user. No mystery here. It's Carrie. Not sure what the topic is today. I'm at a loss today in life. Well, the way to find yourself is not to worry about anything. I do this show, rain or shine, ready or not, and I always like to be more prepared, but I understand. I feel more aligned with everybody who isn't worried about a mistake, right? Because then you don't have confidence or comfort in the audience that you're sharing, right? If the next bad word or misthought doesn't hit and that's it, that gives you some information. What did the lid say to the jar? You complete me. Well, Carrie, that's the joke of the day then. Getting back to Karl, what's your thoughts?
Well, this is a fun week because Don invited me to join Con and him on the show this morning. I have my own show on Tuesday mornings at 8:00 on successful funding, but this week, because I'm going to be working with a group of students in the country of Belize all next week, I'm doing a double header. So I have a show tomorrow and then on Thursday, and that's sandwiched in between showing up on Don's show again on Wednesday. So I feel like I'm in my daily show this week. But it's so much fun to talk about in value because to the point Con made and also Don is value is in the eye of the beholder. There is no more bespoke term, I think, in the dictionary than value, because what may be valuable to me may be worthless to someone else. And when you talk about a relationship where you want a win-win scenario, each party, each person has to get value out of it that's enough for them to justify a transaction or maintaining the relationship or something like that. And this is part of what I do day in and day out is I try to understand what the other person thinks is of value to them, because that's how we put together investment offers. Is that, well, if I put something on the table that's important to me, but it's useless to the other person, we're not going anywhere. And this is something that a lot of small businesses still don't understand, either in their products or services or in making offerings to raise capital, that you got to start first with the other person in mind. You have to, as you say, stand in their shoes, walk in their shoes, talk about the value to them, how they perceive it, what they consider important. And if you can't get there from here, then you're missing out on almost everything.
Well, that's so perfect, Carl, and that's why we have you on so often. You get better every time you show up. But here's Harvey's making an announcement. So proud of Harvey. I'm launching another live show every Thursday now. It's called Franchising Brand Stories. Me and Harvey I've been learning little bits about it. It's going to be a really great show because it's going to be a different show with different dynamics. I guess franchisors are going to come on with franchisees or some of theirs, so it should be pretty interesting. Is the way to engage, and the live nature allows the audience to direct so they naturally gain value. You know, it's the explorers, it's the people that have what other people want and they still want to do more and be more. You know, where you don't let someone else's expectation limit you into what your capability is. Dennis wants to know, Harvey, what time can we chime in? Happy to have you share that, Harvey. Beverly's here. Beverly's one of the fold. Every Tuesday, women's empowerment. Me and Beverly team up so well individually and together, but also when we bring a third person in. And actually, I've got a person I haven't even mentioned to Beverly yet. It just happened over the weekend, that will be appearing with Beverly. I think it's April 2nd. And she's an 18-year-old influencer on LinkedIn. She just did a post that got 90,000 views and is just showing the next generation of what's coming up. And I think being able to embrace success, wherever it comes from, whoever creates it, is the opportunity as a host that you can showcase and help along their way. It's kind of like those old talent shows, or I guess those new talent shows. And Beverly says hello to Carrie. So, Con, a lot going on for a Monday. And you know what I love about this? It's so comfortable and informal. And the easier you can make it, the better it does, because easy doesn't relate to lazy. It just means kind of easy. So, Con.
Well, I want to kind of link it back to something that Karl mentioned earlier as well. When I teach the concept of value, if I do value-centered work with a lot of my clients, one of the things that I bring forward is what I call the value equation. And if you think about it in simple, as a math depiction, if you will, value equals delivery over expectations. That's the mathematical equation that I share with them. And basically, I explain to them that for people to perceive value, the delivery, whatever it is that we're delivering, the opportunity, the discussion, the product, the service, whatever that is, has to meet or exceed their expectations. That gives you the number that you're looking for, that positive whole number, that 1 or +1 or whatever it is that you're looking for. If your delivery doesn't meet their expectations, they won't see the value. And that's the part that we need to understand. Karl, in your case, for your investors, you were talking about it earlier, there has to be a win-win. It can't just be for you. Your investors have to see that my expectation is this. If you can meet or exceed those expectations, I perceive value and I want to continue doing business with you. It's as simple as that. It's not more complicated than that. It doesn't have to be. How we get there can have a lot of facets and a lot of different approaches to do it. But the concept itself is very simple. It's just not easy. It's not easy to deliver value every time that you work with somebody. It's not easy to meet and exceed people's expectations, because the reward for good work is more work, and people expect it. People expect to see Don here at 9 o'clock in the morning. And Karl, you're spoiling them. They're going to expect to see you every morning here as well.
No, I'm not going to go there, but just got an observation on this. We talk about when somebody puts a price on a product or service. Technically, my experience has been that the customer expects the value of that product or service to be greater than the price point. The price and the value are not equal, but a lot of people treat them as though they are. Same thing in investment. They give you an amount of money in an investment, but what they want back is more than what they put into it. And as you say, their expectation is set by a variety of different factors. But it's important for people to understand that, what's up here in the head is not necessarily what's showing up on the paper or on the price or the receipts or something else. That is basically a starting point for where you're going to go.
Right.
Well, I think too, when you talk about value, Con made a good point. It's in the eye of the beholder. You would anticipate if someone wanted to invest money, they'd get a quality return and it would be somewhat safe, at least as much as possible. But then other people may be in an urgent situation where they say, I know I could get more if I wait, but I just want to do what I got to do right now. That changes the whole perspective of the person trying to deliver value. And I think that's where qualifying, which is part of the top word up there, comes in, is really doing the conversation before you construct the outline or the framework of whatever it is you're trying to do. So,
Don,
go ahead.
Part of that, though, is the time of as you put it, time is one of the elements of value. Somebody may say, I could make more dollars over a longer period of time, but I need the money next week to pay a bill or do something. Well, that becomes a new value element to them. That isn't necessarily a value element to anybody else.
No, and you're right. And I think by just knowing direction, knowing what expectation and anticipation is, because if someone says, I want to double my money in a week, it's like, show me anywhere you can get that. Right? If it's just me and you, it seems like I'm responsible. But if you put it out to the world and no one can do that, plus, there is something to reality. There is something to having a range, not just a specific number or date. Right? I'd like to raise between 800 and 1.2 million. Right? That's a range versus I need this, buy this, buy this. That's not like going into a grocery store and exchanging money for things. Beverly says, that's so true. The reward for good work is more work, and you need to up-level all the time and provide even more value. And work is the key word here, because if it feels like work, it's not going to be sustainable. If you have to grind, if you have to squeeze and you have to accommodate, that really brings us to where does value come from? And typically it's from values, right? And if you have the proper values and you know where the yellow lines are, that's a huge benefit to the other party, right? If they know you're going to act in high integrity, full disclosure, partnership, it's to the exclusion of somebody that puts somebody at a disadvantage. And a lot of people think, I don't have to explain this, or I'm good enough that you should just believe and trust and wait until I deliver it. And that tells you something on the other side. because, I found is not the deal, it's the experience of the deal. When you buy a new car and somebody makes you feel like you're number one in the world, by getting in it, driving it, being part of it. I think that makes a difference because you are part of everybody's future experience. And you also would like to get some return business referrals and everything else that goes with happy, satisfied people. So I'll switch it to you, Con. What typically, I know Karl's next, but I'm just curious as to what does it take to make you feel like you have full value from situations you get yourself involved in?
It's a great question. I was thinking about over the weekend we had dinner. We were invited to the house of a new friend, a new couple that we met, and this gentleman's name, Christian Braun. He's into collectibles, and he spends a lot of his time cataloging and working with resellers and stores and collectors, people looking for things. But it struck a chord with me thinking about our discussion this morning about values, because the same thing that I may see as an extremely rare and valuable collectible, somebody else may see it as a piece of junk. And it's so much of that is just in the eyes of the beholder, like we talked about. And it's the same way that I try to approach it with my clients, because we are in many ways in a business of contributing and supporting and offering services that create value specifically for our customers. It's important that we have that conversation early on. I mean, one of the early conversations that I have with the customer is to help frame what the pain point is and how painful is that? Because if we can solve that pain point, that has value for our customers. I mean, when I look at the discussions that Karl brings up right now, for example, his customers, the pain point is cash flow. They need money to be able to start, to grow, to expand their business. They're looking for the fuel for their rocket to be able to get going. Well, that has value for his investors. What they're looking for, the pain point is, I have this money sitting here that is not going to do anything if it's just sitting here. I want to maximize the return. I want to make my money work for me. And that's the pain point, and that has value for them. For you, Don, I mean, what you're truly doing with the solution here is you're trying to help people that their pain point is exposure and being able to reach an audience. And that has value for people. What that value is a discussion that you need to have over early on and say, okay, what is the pain point? And if I solve that pain point, that means that it has that much value for you. And that's how we need to be positioning that as business leaders, as consultants, as coaches, as providers of solutions. We need to be able to help our customers articulate. They are the hero of the story. We are simply the guides, the support people that are going to help them get there. But in order to understand that, the hero needs to understand the severity of the problem, how much pain they're in. And most of the time, people won't act until the pain gets pretty severe.
Yeah, you make excellent points, Con. And, looking at this journey that I started about 1.5 years ago, and where I started, how I started, who I started with, why I started, was only like half of the story, because it got me to where I really should be and how I should do and who I should do it with. But unless you went through the first half, you would have never got to a starting point for the second half. And too many people set sail and they go straight. And there is something to a line. A line between something is a straight line is the shortest way to get to somewhere. But you may not know that's the place you want to get to, and you've already made that journey. Versus the pivoting, the going from end to end, person to person. And you find value then. And somehow you have to work to find the value, then you have to work to achieve the value. So, and if you put it in a time frame, the most important thing is what position are you in from there? Because there is no outcomes, everything's a continuum. When you finish something, you're going to be starting something. And did what you just finished allow you to have a higher level into the next range of opportunities? So Karl, this seems to be something we all kind of think about, how to be as valuable to as many people as possible, how to create a positive situation that we're involved in that at times may not feel very positive. And at the end of the day, it's all communication, right? Because everything is what everything is, and everything in the middle is conversation or the ability to keep people in the game with you, right? Solicit that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be communicating all the time. And it's, again, something where if you're going to enter into a relationship, whether it's an investment, business deal, whatever, you start off at the beginning trying to make sure that everybody is thinking the same thing, that you're all working together. And even if you have different values you're going to take away from a deal or a transaction, that transaction is supposed to achieve both goals, not just a single goal. And so they talk about in law that a contract is a meeting of the minds, where you get everything on a document that a third party can look at and go, this is what it says. And sometimes that requires a judge or a jury to come back and reaffirm that everybody did a good job of that. But what is interesting is that continuous communication, because everything changes all the time. And if you ink a contract too many times, it's just left as though it's a monument to that agreement, but the world changed around them, and nobody can perform the contract to either party's expectations. So you have to go back and make changes, amendments. That's what the word amendment means, is this contract is not in concrete, it's flexible. You can move with the times, do what you need to do. And it's come up in conversation recently where nobody makes an investment with the expectation that the value is going to go down. And unfortunately, that's the reality of businesses. They go up and down. The roller coaster of entrepreneurship, of startups, growth companies is a reality. They still hopefully will get to their goal where they wanted to get to their goal at the time and at the level of expectation. But between those 2 points, we could see all kinds of stuff happening in between. And that's where communication is also important. You want to keep everybody who's in the deal, in a relationship, in a transaction that's unfolding over time, to know where everybody stands, so that they may join in making a change, agreeing to an amendment, or changing the deal entirely to preserve the deal, to keep it from just being a complete train wreck. So communication of value up front, communication while something's unfolding during the term of whatever is going on, all these contribute to the relationship and to both parties getting a win-win out of it. So it's an interesting thing to deal with expectations and then deal with them within a realistic setting. So everybody is not surprised, nobody is getting spooked or thrown off. They understand that this is what's going to take place. And a good, experienced investor will understand that not everything will go smoothly. In fact, they will anticipate some issues or challenges, hard points along the way. But as long as they're informed, they're usually okay. It's the surprises that cause frustration, anger, other bad emotions.
Yeah, I think that's so important, the dynamics of the relationship. Looking back at my career, almost every great relationship was fluid. There was always documentation for whatever we do, but there was always, hey, we didn't mean this. We said this, but we don't really mean it. What are we going to do to make it right? And it's just like if you're on a trip with a bunch of people and you look back in the back seat and say, is everybody having a good time? Right? And if someone says, well, I'm getting kind of bored, or this isn't what I thought, well, let's talk about it, right? No sense extending, any misery or grief or dissatisfaction. And, if you're right, you stand on your values and the value. And if people are right, they understand and they make an accommodation, because a relationship is too important to focus on how much you're going to make off of somebody. Now, if you're just purely transactional, that won't come into play, right? If you got a contract for 30 days to get something, that's it. But if you say, hey, we're going to go into business together and hopefully we'll be years together, it's like, hey, what isn't working for you? Because in most cases, I found what's important to you isn't that important to the other person. Usually when I did something with people, the money was the last thing they needed or wanted to achieve. They wanted the experience. They wanted to try things or do things that they were interested in. And I think that was always key. And you always felt better when someone did something you knew they weren't required to do. Anybody could have taken out the contract and say, hey, look at here, but that would have been disrespectful to both parties, right? Because when you made the deal, no one knew what was going to come ahead. It was what the best hope you had for the future. And I think, what comes around goes around. And people aren't always altruistic when they make an adjustment or they give you more room or whatever, because they expect that to come back to them the same way when a situation arises. And that's why people tend to do it, because it's like, hey, I'll make another investment that wasn't intended here. I'll make another contribution, because at the end of the day, that person says, I care about you and I care about your happiness and I care about bringing value. And that separates you from the rest of the, people are just looking to make a buck or take advantage of somebody or something. So, Con, this is pretty, I guess, relatable to what anybody's industry is, because they're always dealing with employees, partners, customers, and how do you make it right and bring more value?
Listening to you, Don, it's fascinating, because I hear what you're saying, and hopefully both parties will have that kind of mutual respect and positive intent. That experience has been that not everybody is that way. There's a lot of people that will hold your feet to the fire if you have a contract. You want to make sure that that there is a human element to it, that there is an understanding. If you need to renegotiate something, there should be room for that. But again, it brings us back to the other half of the equation. We talked about, expectations and understanding those expectations of our customers, of the people that we work with, or the person that's in the back seat of the car when you're going on a trip. But it's the delivery, the consistent delivery. When Karl talks about why people come to him consistently, it's because he consistently delivers what he says he's going to do. And if he can't, or for whatever reason, something is not going in the way that it was originally intended, he's willing to keep the channels of communication open and renegotiate or have a discussion. But it's the same way with those that he works with his investor partners. For most of them, an experienced investor partner spreads the risk. They're not going to sit there and just put all their eggs in one basket and expect that is going to deliver the Holy Grail to them. They're looking at it and saying, okay, I'm going to invest here, 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 and here. If two of these deals pan out the way that I hope they will, I'm good. I made my money back. I've made the value that I was seeking. And I know that sometimes I'm going to win and sometimes I'm not going to win. That sometimes it's not going to deliver what I hoped it would. But that's part of what an investor does. The same way that I work with clients a lot of times, that in many ways, when they don't have a lot of experience working with consultants or with coaches or with people in my field that are here to support them and bring value, sometimes they have unrealistic expectations. Sometimes they don't know what to expect, and it slows down the entire process. Hence, part of what you have in the title for today's session with the qualifying. You need to understand that you have a choice of who you work with. There are times where I say, you know what, hey, I don't think you're ready to work with me. In all honesty, you have a pain point. You want to solve it, but I don't think you're ready to work with anybody. You just have too much fun right now talking about your problem, and you're not ready to pull the trigger on something. That's okay. I need to work with people that are ready to move on things. And most of the time, I recognize that any sane business person that I talk to, and I say, look, give me $1 and I'll give you 4 or 5 back, because the pain point, the problem that you have is much bigger than the investment that you're making. And the value that I can bring is significant. When I wrote the book, The Engagement Blueprint, and I explained to people that lack of engagement, outside of the fact that it makes your culture miserable and nobody wants to be there, the bottom line is it's costing you money. It's costing American businesses last year $350 billion. It's costing across the globe $7.8 trillion. These are staggering numbers. And for a business owner, even a small business owner, I explain to them, 1 in 5 of your people on average is going to be miserable. And that miserable person is creating cancer and toxicity in your workplace. They're costing you 1/3 of their salary. If you're paying that person $10,000 a year, they're costing you $3,400. If you're paying them $100,000, you can 10x that. And you realize the impact that that kind of problem has on you. But it's only when you acknowledge that pain point and you understand that and you're prepared to work with somebody to help solve that, that things are going to start changing. If people realize that, you know what, hey, I can't grow and scale to where I want to without the cash flow, then I need to find somebody who's reputable, somebody that I can trust to go get that. If I need to be able to reach a bigger audience, I need to find who the expert is and somebody who can help me get there. If I need to solve an engagement problem, I know who to go to. These are the things that we bring, but it's that consistent delivery, that proof. A lot of people talk this. There's so many people out there on the internet and on this platform today making claims that you look at it and you go, where did you even get that? I mean, our dear friend Kelly, how many times does she talk about the infamous pitch slap? You meet somebody and all of a sudden they have no idea about you, but yet they can solve all of your problems and cure cancer in the process. And it's like, you don't even know what I do, yet you're out here telling me that you can give me $50,000 more a month just by using your proven system. You don't even know what I do. And yet people make these outlandish claims. But where's the credibility? Where's the delivery over time consistently? That's the piece. That's what separates the professionals and the people that are capable from the jokers out there.
You make so many wonderful points, and you're spot on so much. What comes to mind is understanding more of who you are. I mean, you're right. There's people tell you things that no one can do. There's people who tell you nothing. And there's people who actually bring hope. And to your point, as far as if you're looking at it from a business standpoint, so many businesses are focused on how do we get distribution costs down 0.5 point? You know, how do we get margins up 1 point? When all the value and distinction is how do we get more from the people we're invested in and invest in us? Because to your point, if we can get a 30% bump in productivity because we adjust culture, because maybe we listen more, maybe we make people feel more valuable. These are attributes. They're not capital investments, right? If everybody said, be a little kinder today when you're talking to customer service, right? Be a little bit more thoughtful, have a little more patience. It's those things that you want to coach people. I actually started watching a Netflix series yesterday about 5 world-class coaches. And in different fields, one was soccer, one was basketball, with Doc Rivers was the first gentleman. And it was what they believed was the strategy to get teams to championship levels, right? And that's where more companies should be investing, because if you look at the top expenditure, it's typically payroll, right?
Yep, it's the labor line.
and that is going out. right? If you invest in marketing, you measure that, right? So if you put 100 grand in marketing, you get 90, you really invested 10, right? If you put 100 grand into people, now what happens to those people? They're not robots. They're not set and forget. Or if you do, you're going to get the bare minimum. And you know what? Who wants to get the bare minimum? Because the other person's dealing with the bare minimum. And it's the human potential. And I think that's why shows like this, if they could pass the microphone around, if I had a company again, had a lot of people, I'd have a show every day and I'd be featuring an element of the company. I'd have the best salesperson or the best customer service person explain what it is, have customers on, great customers to share experiences. Why limit your exposure? Why not have a more relevant, amplified reach? Because again, that's a competitive advantage you can have at hardly any financial risk, with huge opportunities to manifest great human potential. And I think you can say that once or twice and people could hear it once or twice. That's all there is. But it takes change. It takes management, leadership change to make that happen. I saw today, I think what Jeff Bezos said, that in Amazon, he wanted to have a culture where the lowest employee could have a disagreement and win with the highest employee. That everybody had a say-so if everybody had value. And I thought, hey, how does Amazon get to a $1.8 trillion valuation? And doing it without Jeff anymore involved in the operations. Why? He built a culture, an environment. Apple was the same way. These things exceeded founders and the original people because they built things into it that were timeless, that won't get affected by technology. And, I think they realize what it costs to hire, retain, promote, support, train. And when you pull back the fuel that drives these people, it's counterintuitive in every way. So, Karl, coming back to how much potential there is out there, how do you take this message to prospective clients and add this to their business philosophy or plan?
Well, I think that what you try to convey to them is that the customer is always right. There's a bunch of cliches that come into play here, but you can't sell your product or service if it conveys no value to your customer. And at a higher level, you can't raise funding into a business unless it's going to convey value to the investors. And at that point, they have to quit talking about themselves and they have to start asking the question for this particular investor candidate, not all investor candidates, but for the one that is in front of them at the moment. Does this convey value? How much value is it going to be? Because that investor candidate has a choice to walk away. They have a choice to negotiate the deal to make it better for them, or they can decide to make an investment. And all too often these days, with the chaos that currently exists in the capital market, nobody really can give you a very accurate projection of where we're going and where the markets are going to go up or down. I still have as many people looking for a hard stop in our economy sometime later this year, early next year, while other people are proclaiming, nope, we're beyond that point. And they're in complete 180-degree disagreement. So when you walk into the relationship, one of the things you want to talk about is dealing with uncertainty. How are we going to move forward where we can continue to keep our eye on two goals? Your goal as the investor and my goal in running the small business. And sometimes what we're engaging in has never been done before, which makes it more art form than science. But as long as those communication channels are open and the ability for both sides continually, I call it continuous amendment of the agreement. I mean, I'm in some projects now where I'm like, well, we may need to amend this by this afternoon. We get in one more data point, and it changes the entire picture, the risk threshold, whatever we're trying to do. And a lot of times when I'm working with clients who don't understand raising capital or are not fully informed, I'm spending like one word out of three saying, oh, by the way, I want to make sure you understand what it is I'm thinking and how I'm going about this. Because if you have a question and don't understand, I need to know that. I need to know that you didn't just hear words floating past you. They all stuck somewhere upstairs. And we're all consciously thinking together as a group. We're not doing this just because I said so. And because, again, if things change, the value proposition may change, the person whose expectations may have changed, and we need to be working towards constant shifting to stay in tune with where everybody wants to go. And we may reach a point where we say, this isn't going to work. We're done. We can't get where we want to go from here. And rather than throw good money after bad, let's just call it a day and do that in a nice, friendly fashion rather than throwing lawyers at each other.
Yeah, that's perfect, because I've been in situations where they're not tracking well at a certain point because people's understanding somehow had amnesia, or they forgot why we're doing this or why we decided to do it. And again, first time out, you think, well, that might have been a mistake, might have been a misunderstanding. But if it becomes a pattern, and I think it's also a point where your reputation is affected by your association, right? So if you bring a jerk into a meeting, everybody looks at you, not the jerk, after a while, because you brought them in, or her, or whatever. And there's a point where you just say, this ain't, I guess coming from the street is different than coming from different places, because you just feel things. There's a different flow, there's a different energy, and there's a different way of communicating and interacting. And at a certain point, say, hey, that ain't even close. And people won't be that surprised. They'll be surprised that maybe you figured it out or you called them out. And again, that doesn't mean it's a judgment. It just means there's a gap now. Then unless that gap gets resolved, that's it. And, I agree. Good money after bad money, good time after bad time. But it's also what it does to your psyche, right? When someone's living in your mind that doesn't pay rent because they're making you crazy with the whole circumstance, it affects your other relationships. It affects your motivation and your positive attitude. And that's too big of a price to pay. And some people get lost in the money. If I hold on long enough, if this works, but at a certain point, they're just fooling themselves, and they're creating a momentum that's going the wrong way. Because at the end of the day, it's not how much you have, it's who you have. And if you build enough trust and you have enough relationships and people believe in you, they'll come to your aid. At the same time, the question I would ask people, especially who are looking for capital, is what happens if you don't get it? Right? What happens if you don't get as much? What happens if you get it on terms you weren't happy with? And I found there is always more you can do. And there's always less you have to invest in just to keep the wheels on the bus.
Well, and Don, to that, that's part of the constant communication, is you're asking the question and trying to be respectful of the other person's interest and values. Is something changed here? I don't know we're going to get where you want to go. What else can we do to make this work for you? And kind of the point you made earlier about Amazon, where the lowest employee can have a disagreement with the highest employee. Well, that's all well and good if we're talking about Amazon, but what about the employee? To Con's point, if that lowest employee is unhappy, guess how much more that employee is costing you? Whereas if this is a mutually beneficial relationship where the Amazon's taking into consideration the needs of that lowest employee, then they want to put in that extra amount. They want to keep the job. They want to move everything forward.
Con?
Yeah, and listening to you guys, I mean, there's such an element of, when we talk about communication, when we talk about interactions, when we talk about essentially relationships. I mean, and that's a big part of what we're talking about. Value is the perception that we have of the relationship that we have right now. And it's like, whether it's a business transaction, a business relationship that we're trying to form, an investment relationship, whether it's a friendship, a marriage, whatever it could be, there's situations there where circumstances change and you need to keep the channels of communication open. People's expectations change. The value they perceive from that relationship changes. And there's so much of that we sit around feeling miserable a lot of times, when we could simply have that conversation and adjust our expectations, or let the people know on the other end of that, hey, you know what? You're not delivering what you said you were going to do. What's going on? And really being able to keep that channel open. It's the same thing with the work, with engagement in workplaces. What is it? It's the human relations that we're trying to figure out, because people don't leave companies, they leave bosses. And it's the relationship with your boss that's make or break with you. The person that supervises you directly is one of the most important relationships that you can have in an organization. And that's the reason why so many of my clients invest in developing their leaders at all levels. Why? Because they have a direct correlation. Their relationship with their people has a direct correlation with how productive and how successful and how satisfied and how engaged they are. And all of that translates to both feeling better about things, but also getting better results for everybody. And that's ultimately what we're talking about. Everything that we do, there's a human element to this. If it was just 1+1, if it was just moving widgets from point A to point B, management and leadership and life would be so much simpler. It's not, because we're dealing with human beings, and human beings are anything but simple. And that's the part that we need to understand. We are talking about people's perceptions when it comes to value, what their expectations are when we're looking to qualify that relationship, when we're trying to work together and have that kind of consistent, productive relationship and valuable relationship. It's all about communicating and making sure that we stay in touch with each other, that we are understanding where each person is, because you can set off in opposite directions without even realizing it. And if you don't communicate, you can't course correct. And if you can't course correct, you wake up one day and you realize, this is not where I want to be.
Well, I think part of how you score big is how you keep score. And what that says, if everybody's just doing enough, how much more could have got done if somebody was aware of people who did more and rewarded that, made that an incentive? Because if you're watching everybody every minute, they're being watched every minute. And how do you feel when someone's over your shoulder? Someone's, harder on mistakes than they are on the benefits you bring. It makes you risk averse, of not opportunity oriented. And how do you forgive is how you're going to be forgiven, right? How good natured you are. That's why I always bring up the bowling parties every month. It was an opportunity for very little expense to meet so many parents and uncles and friends and neighbors of the employees and get to know them from a different perspective and get known as a different person that most people anticipate. So it's really when the rubber meets the road that you show up or don't, right? All the manuals, all the handbooks, all the flowery speeches mean nothing when you walk by somebody in the hall and you don't look at them or even say hello to them. I mean, I think people forget what it was to be what they are working with, because everybody started pretty much at the beginning, maybe not at the bottom, but at the beginning of whatever they got into. And people forget what it is. And at different ages, at different stages of life, when people have a family, right, there's an anticipation they're going to need some money, right, for this new person, for this new home. Bless you, must be allergies. So I think it's taking the time. Everybody's an individual. Everybody's different. And why not take that time to get to know, meet, greet, be available? I agree, an open door office is not always the most efficient, but then again, how do people use it? What do people use it for that justifies it? And you got to get better to help other people get better. So many other people, they're into control, they're into ownership, that they just want to control it, tighten it up. And especially not getting anything against bean counters, they typically are focused on numbers instead of on the intangibles. If you look at a balance sheet, it never tells you about the culture. It never tells you about the energy. It never tells you about the commitment, and when you can factor those in, then you say, yeah, it's worth spending some more money if that's what it's going to do, instead of everything individualized and separate. It's really, how does the pie come together, and how enjoyable is it? Because if no one's having fun, it isn't sustainable. If everybody's high-fiving, having a good time in a good way, it makes it for, hey, I want to go there.
Yeah, but Don, that's describing an emotional balance sheet. That's, am I getting more back from this exchange, from this relationship emotionally, than what I'm putting into it? And that makes people want to give more, because they realize that they're getting a return on that emotional investment. They realize that, you know what, hey, I'm part of something special. I'm willing to give more into this. I'm willing to come in that on that stay longer, work that weekend, stay in here, pitch in when I need to, or my coworker has a sick kid. I'll take up the slack. Why? Because I know I'm going to get that back from them as well. That's the balance sheet. And if you're operating in the red, that's a toxic environment. When you're emotionally operating in that constant deficit, that's not a good place to be. That's why people, when I talk to them and I ask them, what kind of stresses or what kind of environment are you operating in? I ask them, how do you feel Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, with the mere thought that you have to go into work on Monday? Does it give you joy, or are you dreading it? Do you get that this cramped stomach thing that you're like, oh my God, I have to go in and face these people again? I mean, that's a big difference. When you're operating in a positive environment, in an engaged environment, that looks and feels very different, because that emotional balance sheet is operating in the black, not the red.
Yeah, you make so many valuable points, especially based on quality experience. So, Karl, to kind of wrap it up today, 57 minutes goes so fast. I find that you can look at what we do in so many different ways, and I kind of look at it like a workout, right? All three of us show up at the gym at a certain point, challenge each other with different ways of thinking, different ways of explaining, and everybody comes back a little stronger, a little smarter, going into the next round. Karl?
So I've got to jump to a hard stop here, but yeah, after this cerebral exchange, I feel my brain sweating right now. It's had a very good workout this morning, and I look forward to talking with you guys again in the future. I know you'll say good things as soon as I sign off here in a couple seconds, yeah, this value, relationships, communication, change, these are all, elements that all have to work together, and they're all represent kind of different perspectives. And I got up this morning and going, hey, I get to be on the show with Don and Con. Yay. So good for me. Help make my morning. But thank you guys. I got to jump.
Okay, well, enjoy. I'm glad we chose you to go first on saying goodbye. So we'll talk again, and we'll probably see each other on Thursday.
Wednesday.
That's right. Wednesday and Thursday. I forgot the rotation. Well, anyways, Thank you, Karl. I mean, if anything, Karl continued to show what a quality individual he is and somebody you should engage at first opportunity. So,
Good luck, my friend.
Con, what's your final thoughts?
I go back to the simple equation, my friend. Value equals delivery over expectations. Be clear about what you deliver. Be clear about what you expect. Make sure that that good communication will allow you to keep good friends around you. That's what we say in Greece. Good communication makes for good friends.
Well, couldn't have ended it on a better note. I love your book in the background. I would suggest everybody go and take a look at it. If you can, purchase it and read it. Come back with thoughts and comments. And, you know, we're all here to share and make everybody's pie a little bit bigger just from sharing other people's insights and experiences that you don't have to go through to receive. So with that said, we're
Agreed.
right on the money. Thank you again. It goes so quick. Come back tomorrow. It'll be Beverly and me. And then Wednesday will be Karl and me. So thank you. Have a lovely day.